Hey, what's going on, folks? We have a great show for you today. Is raw milk illegal in this country? You're going to be shocked at the rules, and our farms under attack. A guest will be joining me today after I show you this shocking clip from Rebel News exposing a farm under attack in Pennsylvania for the crime of wanting to make food and drinks the way God intended.
I'm Jeremy Lafredo for Rebel News in Birdenhead, Pennsylvania. It's here, in this old Amish community where armed federal agents recently raided Miller's organic meat and dairy farm. The government is arguing that the farm isn't adhering to federal regulatory requirements concerning food, while the farm argues that this is just the latest attack on independent farmers giving their communities healthy food.
The Miller Organic Farm in Birdenhead, Pennsylvania, a remote Amish village, has been around for almost 30 years. The farm supplies everything from grass-fed beef and cheese to raw milk and organic eggs to dairy from grass-fed on-site water buffalo and all types of produce to roughly 4,000 private food club members who pay top dollar for high-quality whole food. The private food club members cherish their ability to get food from an independent farmer who isn't processing his meat and dairy at United States Department of Agriculture facilities, which mandates food be prepared in ways that Miller believes make it less nutritious. Miller contends that he's preparing food the way God intended. The US government doesn't see it that way. They recently sent armed federal agents to the farm and demanded he cease operations. The government is also looking for more than $300,000 in fines, a request so steep it would put the farm out of business. This is an attack on Amish religious freedoms just 150 miles outside of Washington, D.C. It also speaks to the gross corruption at the USDA. As is available on the USDA's site, the agency is funded mostly by the federal government, but it also receives hundreds of millions of dollars from the agricultural industry. Companies like Bayer, Syngenta, and Cargill stand to lose millions, even billions of dollars worth of market share if more American farmers opted for holistic farming practices like Miller's farm instead of chemical-heavy, technology-heavy, industry-friendly practices. Making it even more independent, Miller's farm doesn't use any gasoline or fertilizer, and therefore the war between Ukraine and Russia isn't affecting his bottom line. He's not dependent, and he's providing healthy food to his community the way he believes God intended, and the government is trying to intimidate and shut it down.
Rebel News will be here in Amish country at the end of the week when the farm explains to the community their next move in their fight against the federal government.
Joining me today is Joshua Rayner, who jokes and calls himself a raw milk propagandist, regenerative farmer, apprentice butcher, and sunshine maximalist. It's going to be a great show, folks. It starts now. It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles. It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles. Yeah. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to this morning's episode of Dream Rare Podcast. I'm here with the very tough raw milk propagandist. I thought that was hilarious. Josh, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah, so can you give us some backstory? I saw your tweet go pretty or semi-viral about that farm story in particular, and it seemed like you had some background info on what's going on there with the Amish and the government restrictions.
Yeah, so I've been buying food and raw milk from Amos Miller for almost 10 years now. He kind of has this really incredible system where, it's a private membership association, and so that's supposed to be able to get around a lot of these regulations. And so there's co-ops all over the country that he sends his food through. You can actually buy directly. They'll ship raw milk straight to your door. And so he had the system set up for people who wanted real food and understood that for the most part, you can't get this stuff in stores. And about 2015, from my recollection, they didn't like that he was doing this. It's one of those things where you can follow the rules technically, but they're going to come after you if you're still doing things they don't want you to do. And so they've been trying to do the whole raw milk scare thing for a while now, but they tried to pin him on some listeria contamination thing, and whenever they do these, this person got sick or died from raw milk, which even on its own, really never happens. I posted a meme about a year ago that it's I think there's been 3 recorded deaths in the last 30 years from raw milk. And that's pretty dubious how they even attribute that. Basically, someone goes to the hospital or what do you do? And someone's like, oh, well, I had raw milk once. And they're like, oh, that must have been why you got sick or something. And
right,
so
and lightning strikes and icicle droppings, these kill people every year. So
yeah. Well, no joke. One of those 3 deaths recorded was a girl who drowned in her pool. And because she had drank raw milk at some point, that they attributed to raw milk death. So yeah, they pinned him on this listeria contamination, and so they're basically they tried to kind of come after him in various ways, and they're trying to put pressure on him and sue him, put him out of business for selling raw milk, and that wasn't really seeming to stick. He was being able to sell with no problems, and for whatever reason, their attempts at getting at him weren't working, and so then they tried to get him for how he processes his meat, because all the meat that you can buy in a store has to be USDA certified processed. If you go to Whole Foods or any type of local natural grocery store that has 100% grass-fed, grass-finished organic meat, that farmer, who might still have the best practices in the world, still has to send their cows out to a USDA processor, where by law they are required to sanitize the meat. So they wash it with a citric acid solution. And a lot of times people, they hear citric acid and they go, what, that's like lemon juice or something? The citric acid that you see in an ingredients on your food in the stores, it's in your drinks, it's in your packaged foods, it's what all your meats wash with, is actually harvested from a GMO black mold. So that is used as this preservative to kill any life on the meat. And so he decided he didn't want to do that, because he's like, why am I, raising the meat to the best standards in the world and having to wash it with poison? So he did all of his own in-house processing. And so they come after him constantly for saying, oh, this is not, legal to be sold to the public. And so what they do, and because I have a co-op, local to me in Colorado, where we order food from him every so often. They basically have to take their beef, their lamb, their chicken, and their pork off of their menu like once every like 2 months, 3 months or so, when they're basically being under investigation. And during that time, you can actually only buy their water buffalo or rabbit meat, because those aren't regulated by the USDA.
Okay, so folks, I have a list right here. Someone said alcohol kills tens or hundreds of thousands, probably millions of people a year worldwide. Of course, we found out that prohibition wasn't the answer. They told us that. So, they could lock us in your house, take away your gym. People die of opioids, but they don't cancel that. But raw milk, they have to cancel. Here's the laws on the record. I looked it up. It says only 13 states allow the sale of raw milk in retail stores. Only 17 states allow the sale of raw milk on the farm, which it was produced. Only 8 states allow raw milk to be obtained through cow share agreements. And 20 states prohibit the sale of raw milk for human consumption. And folks, this is from Chicago Tribune. I looked up a bunch of ingredients in America. I always talk about this, that are illegal in other countries, but they're legal here. One of them happens to be dairy with RBST or RBGH hormones. And Chicago Tribune writes, in the United States, milk, unless marked otherwise, is treated with either RBST or RBGH, which are artificial hormones that stimulate milk production. The FDA says it's no different than the milk produced in cows treated without the hormone or with it. But countries like Canada and those in the European Union ban it. So apparently Canada doesn't allow this stuff. The entire continent, or most of Europe, the European Union doesn't allow it, but they're more concerned with banning raw milk than they are hormones that are banned in Canada and Europe. Isn't that just interesting?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I had gone and actually looked at all the deaths that they attributed to raw milk over was the last like 30 years. And, it came out to like a fraction of a death per year, right? And then opiates was like 40 something thousand deaths a year. And so, we have this, people don't really think about this all the time, but our food and our pharmaceutical industry are the same industry. They all come under the chemical industry. And so everything is kind of vehicles for these various ingredients that come from petrochemicals, from other synthetic materials. And so it's really hard to even talk about real food when your only access to food is the store. It's most people wouldn't have known that your meat is washed with this, this moldy citric acid, but it's everything, right? I mean, people will go, oh, okay, well, the stuff in the boxes, yeah, that makes sense. But if I buy just meat and produce, it's like, no, your produce has been radiated. right? They try to kill your food so nothing can live on it, which means that the food itself is being killed as well too. They have waxes. Your apples and stuff are coated with wax to make them shinier. It's basically impossible to get real food from the store.
And to play their side, I mean, I'm one of these people that one of these crazy people that completely agrees with you. I drink raw milk. It's legal to buy in California. You could buy it at either Mother's Market or even some Whole Foods. I've tasted raw milk. In my opinion, it tastes way better. I'm not afraid of getting sick from it, and luckily, it's legal in California. But you know, the counter of what they would say, the FDA, the regulators, and I guess people who believe their logic would say it's we have to pasteurize the milk to kill all the bad stuff, right? But as you're talking about, and a lot of people are starting to figure out, when you kill the bad stuff, you're also killing the good stuff. You know, people are starting to drink kombucha a lot. It's questionable whether how good that is because there's so much sugar in it, but probiotics, antibiotics, probiotics. People are starting to be like, oh, probiotic, I need that in my body. So when you shock the milk with this pasteurization process, you're killing also a lot of the good stuff. And a lot of our food that we're doing, that's their logic of cleaning it. Oh, your meat is unsafe to eat, so we're gonna clean it. We're gonna zap it with this stuff. And it's like, what else are you zapping along with the germs, when you're doing this to virtually all the food we're consuming?
Well, I mean, you do that is a good point, but it's not always as simple as like you lose the good stuff with the bad stuff. You have to think about why they started pasteurizing milk in the first place, right? So, pasteurization comes from Louis Pasteur, who is kind of the father of what they call germ theory. This idea that a germ makes you sick, bacteria, viruses, parasites, stuff like that. And so, but milk pasteurization really only got popular once the quality of milk turned to shit. So you had what's known as swill milk, which was the swill left over from the grain distilleries being fed to the cows. And so you're feeding essentially like alcohol, waste and byproduct to these cows. You're feeding, you can look at it like all the conditions they were raised in, all these bad foods that they were raised, bad contaminated water. And so the milk became such poor quality that they had to dye it with chalk and plaster to make it white because it was turning funky colors. And they go, oh, the milk is bad. We need to pasteurize it to make it safe. It's like, well, the milk's bad because everything is bad. The whole process is bad. And so at that point, you're talking about something that shouldn't even be food in the first place. And then, as far as killing bad stuff and good stuff, the Weston A. Price Foundation, which is a really huge organization, which is about real food. They're big supporters of raw milk. They have a website called realmilk.com, which has all kinds of information on raw milk. It has a map to find raw milk. There's also a website called getrawmilk.com. A lot of great resources, but the Weston A. Price Foundation did this experiment where they took different kinds of milk and they left them out to see what would happen. And what you found is that raw milk, because it has its bacteria still in there, those bacteria, which, people talk about good or bad, but regardless, the bacteria that's in there is this like natural biome. Like we have our own bacterial system in our bodies. The milk's bacteria is protecting itself. And there's no such thing as like a truly sterile substance. If you sterilize it, something will fill it in the end.
Right.
And so if you leave raw milk out, I've done this many times, put raw milk, leave it in the jar and leave it on my counter for weeks, months. It just starts turning to yogurt, cheese, sours. It basically makes all these other foods, but it's still not bad. It's still good. It gets like what we might call funky. If you do that with pasteurized milk, it starts to putrefy. You see all this blue mold cell growing in there because there is no inherent bacteria that is a part of the milk to keep it safe. So there's like a natural, almost antibiotic effect from the good probiotics, which are, these little organisms which are basically in this little battle with the kinds that you might not want. And when you pasteurize it, you lose all of that.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know about that, but that's an experiment I could try. With the FDA and the CDC and all these, government regulatory agencies, I feel like 2020 was a manifestation because, a lot of us saw how corrupt they were for a long time with food and drugs. Like you said, they're together. And then it just got so bad that now you can't ignore it, because now they're telling you that your own existence is a threat to everybody's public safety. First, it was milk is a threat to safety, so we have to zap it and put this stuff in it. Meat is a threat, so we have to pump it with hormones. They're dyeing things. I have a whole list. I'm not going to go through everything, but there's so many foods in America that are illegal around the world, but somehow they give it to us. So they can't let you drink raw milk, but they're pumping your Skittles with a food dye that isn't even legal in a lot of countries. And then it got so bad to the point where the people who run the vaccine companies and the government agencies said, you going to a gym is bad. And this is why I harp about 2020 so much. People say, anomaly, drop it. Don't talk about Trump or don't talk about this. And I'm like, it's not the person involved. It's not the character in the Republican or the Democrat Party. It's the fact that they got away with taking away your gym, your beach, and convincing apparently hundreds of millions of people that the only way you could be healthy is to inject yourself with synthetic mRNA, while not even talking about all this stuff with root level health, what you're eating, what you're drinking, how you exercise, what your routine is, whether you get out in the sun. And from the food pyramid days, I know you're taking it back even further with the pasteurization. They told everybody to eat a bunch of grain, eat as much bread as you can. And then the main bread, I don't know at the time if it's the number one brand, but Wonder Bread, which isn't even real bread. So it's so obviously nefarious. And I think until people crack out of like the let me fight over these characters in the two political parties, they won't realize that there's really no one coming to save you when it comes to this stuff until we wake ourselves up and start asking questions about why they're making God-given food illegal and why everything's getting faker and faker and faker.
Well, I'm with you, and I think 2020 is one of the most important things that's ever happened, and in a good way, really. I mean, it's terrible what they did, but think about how many people actually see through stuff they wouldn't have otherwise, right? That made so much stuff clear that they're like, okay, wait a second, I need to rethink all kinds of things because this is clearly, bullshit. Now let's go back and let's look at like even like where these things came from. You brought up the grain thing. I mean, the standard American breakfast back in the day was eggs and bacon and meat and stuff like that. And then you have John Kellogg, right? Basically the father of Kellogg's cereal. He was like an ardent Seventh-day Adventist, and he thought that people had too much libido. They were too alive. They had too much virility to them, and so he thought that giving them grain breakfast corn cereal was going to basically subdue their life force to make them less promiscuous. And so you look at then that starts to shape these recommendations. You have Ansel Keys who fathered like the China study. You have Dwight Eisenhower getting a heart attack, and then while in office, and then everyone now looking at, oh, okay, saturated fat is this bad thing. So then, yeah, you end up with a food pyramid that says 7 to 11 servings of grains a day, not even realizing that, again, we're talking about all these things the government does to our food. The government mandates that all standard wheat flour is fortified with iron. And you're talking about not like iron that you would get in meat, but literal metal shavings. And so if you just ate your meat, you would get all the iron that you needed. But instead, they put this very toxic inorganic iron, literal metal in your cereal and in your grains and your flour that now pretty much everyone who's grown up in the US in the last, 40 years has and eating cereal and bread and any kind of grain has been eating tons of these metal shavings in their system, which are incredibly damaging, cause all kinds of illnesses. And again, it comes from removing you from the real food and then giving you, we took care of it. We put B vitamins and iron in there, so it's the same thing. It's the same thing that's happening now with the bug stuff. They're like, okay, no, don't worry about it. It's got all the nutrients you need. We'll take away the old stuff and we'll give you this new and improved stuff.
I just to play devil's advocate, because I'm unaware of the iron. I know I see everything fortified with iron, and I honestly just assume that it's not the best quality stuff, like naturally occurring. But just to play devil's advocate, they would say that's the iron's great. We're adding it to make people strong. What would you say if someone were to say that?
Well, again, there's always to go back a bit, right? And you go, weird. How did people survive without iron fortified grains throughout all of existence? Well, they had the most nourishing foods that come from animals, fresh meat, milk, things like fruit, potatoes, stuff like that. These good foods are very, very nutrient dense. And it's only once they take away those things, and not just take away, like you said, even they lower the quality of the milk, they lower the quality of the meat. So then the nutrients in them are even worse and worse. And they go, oh, we have identified that this nutrient matters. And even though the form of it is entirely different than the one that you actually want, which can make something from being like a medicine to a poison.
I wanna read some clips real quick because I know a lot about the food stuff, but I'd never really looked into that. So I googled it, right? Our trustworthy friends at Google. But the first thing that comes up is coolscience.org, and it says there's metal in my cereal, and it says, quote, the iron you see in your cereal is elemental iron. Actually, metallic iron fillings or shavings similar to the little flakes you might see coming off a steel wool pad. When you squeeze it, rub it, just much smaller. That's right. You're eating metal in the morning. This is the first thing that comes up. And, Gizmodo also talks about it. Scientific American talks about it. Scientific American actually says get the iron out of your cereal, and they wrote a whole article about it. So it sounds crazy even to myself. I mean, I'm not obviously I trust you, and that's why I brought you on. But since I didn't know, I always try to be as fair and objective as I can and be like, oh, I don't know about that. Let me hear your take on it. And what do you know? They're literally putting minuscule metal shavings in food. It's psychotic.
There's a very weird thing with iron. So I have a 6-month-old son, and he's pretty much exclusively breastfed right now. We've actually given him a little bit of raw milk when we've needed extra, and he's like sucked on like a little bit of like raw egg yolk and stuff, and kind of like the little bit of like the juice out of a fruit. But we just went to our first pediatrician appointment, just to kind of like just kind of have someone look at him, and for the most part he's very healthy and happy. We're pretty content, but we just kind of wanted at least someone who seemed to have some expertise while also being, I guess, what you call like on the alternative side of health. And one of the things that they always bring up about breast milk and formula and stuff like that is they say breast milk doesn't have enough iron in it. And it's like, okay, wait a second. You're saying that this thing that's basically how all humans and mammals have come through into the world and their natural food, it just like God got that one wrong. He like forgot to add the iron in there. And it's like, guys, don't worry. The scientists, we've got it figured out. Your baby needs iron, so we're going to add it in. You need to give your baby an iron supplement, or you need to, we're going to add this to the formula. And this iron thing, I think is it's not just like a simple, oh, there's this one random ingredient. There seems to be these kind of implications of iron with something like EMFs. It's like a really strong EMF receiver, and there's the idea that's like part of their way to affect us stronger and control us with our kind of modern technological world.
Well, with this type of stuff, obviously technology is advancing, and some things in the technological world are super blessing, and we're so grateful to have it. But when you look at the food and drug industry, I mean, our life expectancy is going backwards. Obesity's at an all-time high, or it's been at an all-time high. Childhood obesity spiking, mostly because of the lockdown, but also just because of diets. Like, it's clear to anybody logically, regardless of what you eat, what your diet is, that something's not going quite right. And when it comes to food, eggs, meat, things that grow and look amazing, and then it like pop out, something like a strawberry, whatever it is, it's like, wow, this is so amazing that this grows in the ground. You could literally grow food. So food is this unique thing where natural food is amazing, and we've identified this for thousands of years. And if they were just adding little things to help us, things would make more sense. Be like, oh, just add a little bit of that. But let's go through this list of things that are legal in the US that are illegal. Keep in mind they banned gyms last year. In Mountain Dew, there's something called brominated vegetable oil. They use it as an emulsifier. Brominated vegetable oils banned in Japan and the European Union because it contains bromine, the element, not elephant, found in brominated flame retardants, which can build up in the body and potentially lead to memory loss as well as skin nerve problems. So Japan and the European Union have identified that bromine and flame retardants shouldn't be in your drinks, but the United States FDA says, whatever, that's fine. Chicken that's been chlorinated, chicken produced in the United States gets washed in chlorine, that sounds disgusting, to reduce its spreading of diseases and illnesses like salmonella. This practice is banned in the United Kingdom and the European Union because it promotes unsanitary farming practices. So your chicken's being chlorinated, but in the UK, they obviously wouldn't do that because they're not, I guess, on our level, so to speak. Meat with ractopamine. In the United States, farmers use ractopamine to increase lean muscle growth in livestock, including 40 to 60% of American pigs. Elsewhere, 160 nations, including European Union, Russia, and China, ban the use of the drug in meat production. So 160 nations are banning meat with ractopamine, but the selfish, greedy people in America that just want to pump your animals up and feed you more have it legal. The list doesn't end here, folks. Yellow 5 and red 40, a dye that really serves no purpose, just makes things look shiny and nice. It's banned in other countries. Arby's sourdough bread, croissant, and French toast sticks, I guess, use carbonamide, which is a whitening agent and a dough conditioner in its baked goods. I guess it's the FDA permits it. It's banned in Europe. I mean, there's a whole list of stuff like this, folks, that's banned in all over the world, but the United States says it's fine. So just using your logical brain, are these people doing the right thing? And does it make sense that most states are banning the sale of raw milk when you can literally eat and drink something that's in a flame retardant that they don't even allow in other countries? It's so obvious.
So one of the things to really keep in mind is that it'd be one thing if they just allowed bad foods, but the other thing is that they don't allow us to have the good foods, and that's where this becomes really important.
Right.
And so we have to really, really focus on this whole food freedom thing. Things are getting worse, and as we've seen the supply chains going down, reliance on fertilizer and grain and other ingredients from other countries, stuff like that, we have to really, really fortify this kind of idea that we need to get people back to the land and get people back to producing food. And we need the people who, either don't want to or can't, fighting for the people who are, so that to make sure that we have real food. Because it's, look at how they attack. You see this everywhere. They always attack meat and animal foods. They say that it's destroying the environment. And they were trying to do the whole health thing for a while, and it wasn't sticking. And so if you notice, all of the conversation about animal foods is now purely climate, right? So New Zealand has implemented a cow and sheep burp and fart tax, right? You have this, and you're talking about New Zealand, who's like the biggest exporter of lamb in the whole world. They have some of the highest quality grass-fed meat that is around, and they're attacking that. So we have to really make sure that we have something to fight up against this. We need things that, in a way, like really, it's one thing to fight against the system, but it's also, we have to keep in mind that we have to be able to go around it when possible. And so, every farm that I've worked on doesn't sell their meat to the public, which requires the FDA processing. We've always done a direct-to-consumer thing, which requires some kind of membership type thing. So similar to what Amos Miller did, where they got him from. But again, it's like when you get so big, they're like, no, we don't like what you're doing here. But you have to have a membership thing, CSA. You can have like a membership-based farm store. Just like so for instance, like in California, you can buy it from the store. In Colorado, they have what's called herd share laws, which you're basically buying into the farm, and you're like, oh, it's my milk. I'm a part owner of the farm. I get my milk back. So that's kind of how the meat there works too. And so if you don't, if you want to process your meat all in-house, and so I mentioned I'm starting to butcher now, so that way we can do all of our own processing in the farm and not even have to source it to someone else. And that way we have as much control. We can process when we want to, because that's a huge bottleneck. There's only so many processors. The trying to get meat out to people isn't so much an issue of the supply, but it's how do we actually turn it from cow to beef, right? And then get it to the customer. And so there's only a number of processors who are non-USDA in the first place, and it just becomes really tricky. So we're like, okay, I'm going to have to get trained on butchering so that we can do it all ourselves. We just really have to make sure that people can get food, like real food.
I want to read real quick. The 13 states that allow the raw sale of milk in retail stores is Arizona, California, Connecticut, Idaho, Maine, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Washington. What you'll notice is there's some red states on there and there's some blue states on there, but the majority of Republican states and the majority of Democrat states do not allow you to sell raw milk in stores. Why is this important? This is why I try to challenge the echo chamber. Obviously, a lot of left-wingers don't want to hear things from the right, and a lot of right-wingers don't want to hear me question Trump or the Republican Party because it's just safer to just make fun of the left all the time. But why I tell people no one's coming to save you is not to scare you or to be rude or to, make you feel like there's no hope. It's just the truth. When it comes to the Food and Drug Administration, both parties are lobbied by Big Pharma. Very few people care about the quality of your meat. They'll sell McDonald's if they have to. And it's not even just the burger that's bad, it's the quality. And then the dough conditioners that certain restaurants are using is bad dough. It's not real bread. It's bad for you. It's other countries have identified that. So they love when people fight over Biden or Trump because this is just like the guy. It's like a WWE show and they're the character. And while you're fighting over how you feel about the characters, yeah, you might get a border wall, you might get a tax break, you're going to get a judge or two. I'm not saying that things won't completely change, but at the same time, there are root level issues. What's more root level than the food we're feeding our children? What's more root level than the fact that God's natural food that have been around for thousands of years are being banned by our tyrannical government and nobody cares? You're not going to see this conversation on the television because it's just a big political show that they never get to the root of it. So I really want people to pay attention to what he's saying and just this idea in general, because how they distract people is not just by getting people in office that are puppets and bad, but they distract people by making the conversation that everybody's talking about so out there that it never gets to like the root of what's actually going on. So even if you win, you still lose. Your guy gets in office, you end up in a lockdown. Your guy gets in office, they still print the money. Your guy gets in office, he's still rushing money to the vaccine industries because he works for the vaccine industries too. And that people don't want to hear that, but it's like, we have to hear that, and people got to break out of this spell, or else we're going to live in the bug world, where everything is soy, because it's so clear that they want that.
Yeah, it definitely is really tricky, because like you said, I'm not one of those people that think that like voting is just totally pointless, but it sometimes does feel that way because yeah, you can get little wins here, and I think a lot of us recognize that there are some states or some places which would be better to live in than others, and we have to look at why that is. And so yeah, I mean, people moved from states that were locked down to states that weren't locked down. Then of course those states are going to have those own problems too. And so when you look at something like the raw milk thing, like yeah, you mentioned there's red and blue states both on the yes and on the no. One of the strictest states to get raw milk is Wisconsin because it's the dairy state, which means that the big ag dairy lobby is the biggest there, and they don't want the little guys taking any of their business. Iowa, another one. Iowa, you cannot get raw milk a single place in Iowa. So yeah, I mean, this goes like way beyond politics at certain points too. It's just about like, okay, they're not, like you said, they're not going to help you. No one's coming to save you. What can you do? Can you grow one thing? Can you grow like even just like some basil on your windowsill? If you have an apartment in New York City and you have a little, window, can you grow one thing? That's you taking a step. That's doing something to take a little bit of power back. And so when you're kind of looking like across the board, like, okay, how can you kind of make more of these steps? Okay, now you have a little backyard, maybe you can get some chickens. Now you get your own eggs, right? Every single one of these foods, which you are taking out from the industrial system, is not just giving you better nutrition, more power. It's saving you money. It's creating community. People go, oh yeah, they have so many chickens, and then they give the eggs to their neighbors of the ones they don't eat and stuff. Chickens are great because you can feed them all of your scrap food. You can feed them your scrap. You can feed them your meat, right? People don't realize that chickens are omnivores. When you see vegetarian fed chicken, that's not a good thing. That just means that they're not eating other chickens, like pretty much that's what that means. But chickens are supposed to eat bugs. They're supposed to eat little, rodents and stuff like that. So you can now not waste all your food and then give that out to your chickens, and they give you food back in it, right? They give you eggs back. So there's a lot of different things that people can start to implement. And again, it's understanding how the system is stacked against you. And it's saying, okay, what can I do in spite of that? Instead of hoping that if I just vote for this one guy hard enough, that it's going to save us. Yeah, maybe you can find someone who's better than someone else. And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't vote. I'm not saying try to find good representatives, but make sure you're not relying on them. Make sure you're taking the power back for yourself.
Amen. Yeah, I'm starting to realize that about politics, because we've all had a journey, whether it be left or right, learning different things. But I'm starting to realize it's not even just the people they put in power, like Biden or Trump, because there is going to be a difference. There are going to be policy changes. Like, there would be probably no federal vaccine mandate if Trump were in. But it's like what people don't understand is then they spiral where I'm like, listen, they like, even if you're getting the right guy into office that's better, they almost like that people are in that discussion, because it's like if there were three layers of what matters, they're keeping you in realm number one. When you start getting to realm number two, then you start getting banned or something, and then you get to realm number three and there's only 1% of people. Like, I used to think that left wingers, and maybe this is still true, they're the ones that were progressive with the raw milk and the probiotics, and now because they just hate Trump so much, they don't even think about this stuff anymore. And like you said, on the right, there's a lot of conservative states that have crazy big government restrictions. They claim to be libertarians and Republicans, but they're totally overreaching in the food industry. I have a question for you before we wrap this up, and I just want to know what you think outside of everything. Do you think that, because some people will tell me, it's just logistics. They're zapping all of the milk because it's the safety. It's like locking everyone in their house. It's the safe thing to do. Just zap all the milk. They don't want to be liable, so it's easy. Do you think this is a foolish mistake that they're making and making people fatter and our life expectancy is going backwards and popping pills? Do you think it's a foolish mistake, or do you think it's a concerted effort to really take control of people and make them weak?
I think unfortunately, as with most things, it's both, right? It's like, are they stupid or evil? Well, they're both. They're both. Like, look at how stupid some of these people are, and then look at how like truly evil they can be. And so it's kind of one of those things where, like, at the end of the day, also, like, what difference does it make? Because if they're the ones in control and they're the ones screwing us over, what are we going to do about that? So if you don't like the state of the quality of food, then you have to figure something else out. And yeah, they make it hard to. They come after the little guys, right? You say, okay, yeah, they're trying to make sure that all this milk is safe. Of course, the hormones, the feed, the conditions, the quality. I just drove from Colorado to California yesterday. I drove all day long past so many different feedlots. You can see these confined cows in these situations. Like, none of the farms that I'm on look like that, right? They have all this fresh grass, and here they're all standing in their own shit day after day after day after day. And so, yeah, maybe you do have to pasteurize that to make it healthier. I don't even know if I even believe that, but let's just say that that's true. Well, then don't get your food from these terrible, places. Yeah, unfortunately, the local really good quality farmers and stuff like that stuff costs a lot more. But then, how much does your health cost you?
Right.
You might have to spend twice as much on food, but then you might save tons on medical bills, and maybe you can't afford that now. So you make the best choice you can now. If you look at how people spend their money on all these packaged and processed foods, like there was this meme that I posted a while back where some woman's like, man, I just spent this much money on food. It only lasts us a few days. And it's all like Mountain Dew, potato chips, all these. And it's like, you didn't buy food.
Yeah.
Have you tried buying food? Like, yeah, it might be a little bit more expensive, but not when you actually don't buy that stuff. Now you can buy more meat. You can buy more produce. And
right.
if you, even with the quality that you can get at the store, if you did that, you'd be way better off. And then you probably feel better and you might make more money, and then you can buy more food.
Eggs are, eggs are something that I think are good, and they're pretty cheap, just like making eggs.
Yeah, eggs are phenomenal. They're probably like, I don't know about most people. It's like the first thing that I learned how to cook when I was a kid. You throw some butter in a pan, throw some eggs on there, and you're like, I can cook now.
Right.
It's easy, it's simple, and it's a very nutritious thing. Yeah, the quality isn't the best in the store, but it's still better than anything that you're getting out of a box. But people want that time convenience thing.
Right. Before I ask the last question, I want to say, it's like the cheese in the trap metaphorically, where the government and the regulatory agencies, which, this isn't even a theory, like he was talking about with lobbyists and stuff. Now the big lobbyist in Washington is Big Pharma. People don't want to hear this, but Trump put a pharmacy lobbyist, pharmacy executive at the head of HHS. And when you put Big Pharma at the head of the entire health industry, you get a bunch of vaccines and Big Pharma tyranny. That's what happens. And it's the same with back in the day, it was more big agriculture. It was the dairy and the meat. Back when times were more simple, these industries got so much power and control, and they started paying off politicians to do their bidding. So as time went on, the government started swallowing up more and more and more. And the pandemic was the obvious in your face example of, oh, we're going to do safety over, freedom. But if you go back in the day, even the Department of Education isn't that old. I think it was 1979. So people used to school themselves, whether it be communal churches or place of worship. And then they started doing, well, the government will make it easier for you. You know what I'm saying? The government, if you break up with your husband and have 5 kids, the government will make it easier for you. And it's like they've just made it easier and easier. And America was really crushing. And it was, it's so nice to have all this convenience. And I'm grateful that I don't have to do a lot of this old stuff in order to get my food. But because we got kind of lazy / unaware of what they were doing, as the convenience started coming, the food started getting worse and worse and worse, and they started putting all these ingredients and nobody started paying attention. So that was the cheese in the trap for us, is they made everything easy, they gave it to us, and then they pulled the rug out from under us in 2020, and everyone's looking around. So now it's really time to reevaluate, I think, everything that we do when it comes to food, drugs, and our health, because, that has to be the blessing of 2020. Although it was not a great time for a lot, we have to see it as a blessing and be like, okay, that was the wake-up call. And hopefully people realize that, government bloating over our entire lives is not necessarily healthy for us.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there, and I really don't even have much to add. And so I kind of just want to finish it with this one thing. We're talking about the food and pharma. Realize that every single animal that got turned into food that you can buy in the store has been jabbed.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure they're like. That's why I say they treat us like animals. I always say it reminds me. I'm like a cow on a factory farm where they're like, put it, just like doink, 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 and we're sitting there and they're like locked down, like we're like a caged animal. I want to ask real quick what you think's going to happen to I think his name is Amos, the Amish farmer who has for decades apparently been able to, keep doing it. Do you think they're going to crack down on him? Does this seem like a bigger step than they've taken before? And what do you think?
It kind of just seems to go back and forth constantly. And I think getting more exposure is going to help him, though again it might bring more pressure on him as well too. So I don't know. All I know is that we should definitely support him, and not just that, but use this as a way to show people that like real food is being attacked, and honestly just kind of pray for him. And if you can send money to one of these things, I don't know even how many of these GoFundMe's even they get taken down and stuff. I don't know if Give Send Go's any better. You can also just give them money directly, or you can just start buying from them. You can go to his website and start supporting him directly, and that way you're actually getting some in return. We just kind of have to hope for the best. And what you were saying, they treat us like animals, where the word vaccine comes from in Spanish, vaca, right? Cowpox. Cowpox was the first vaccine. So to vaccinate someone basically means to treat them like a cow.
Can you buy? Is it legal to buy his meat across state lines, or is that illegal? What's the law? I don't know.
Well, so it is legal within the constraints of this private membership thing, and well, they're trying to say that it's not. Honestly, I don't like the letter of the law is kind of one of those tricky things, because like what do laws even mean, and how do they manipulate wording and stuff like that. But if you go to millersorganicfarm.com, you can become a member to his farm, and you can have meat shipped directly to your door. Yes, the shipping will be expensive. You can either take that up or you can not do that. Otherwise, on the right side of his website, there should be something called co-ops, and you can see if there is a local co-op in your town. In which case, you can pick up stuff every 2 weeks. They get a truck, and it saves a lot on the shipping and stuff. It's one of those things where, again, too, like, are we concerned about what is technically legal as they change and manipulate laws, or should we just do what we want to do anyways? Like, that's why the best protest that I always say is living your life in the way that you want to live it, regardless of what they're trying to do. So if you want to support real food, buy real food.
I'm just curious if they even allow it to be shipped on state line. Like, I obviously.
Yeah, like you can. I've had his products FedEx to my door. So they keeps. They let that happen. The thing that they do is they pull all the USDA regulated meats out every month or two when he's like under a smaller investigation, and then they've made him throw away food before. That's this thing that like people don't realize, is that this has been happening for decades and decades, where the government has been paying farmers to basically liquidate their food and throw it away. So they'd rather him throw it away than sell it off to people.
Right. And that's just everybody's reminder before we log off. Obviously live in the present moment. I'm not trying to harp on the future or in the past forever, but if you don't learn from the past, it just keeps repeating itself. In 2020, I know a lot of people try to fight me a lot. That's fine. And just say, oh, it just happened. We just had to print all the money and rush the vaccines because, it was just this like virus and, we had to. And it's like, I don't want to hear that, because that's what you tell yourself. But the same thing that happened to you and me, like the way we all got treated in 2020, that's not a blip in the matrix. It's not a once in a lifetime pandemic that's never going to happen again. It's them doing what they've been doing to farmers for decades. It's them doing what they've been doing to people who want raw milk for decades. It's what they've been doing to people that challenge big pharma for decades. And it finally, the corruption boiled to a certain point that they couldn't hide it and sweep it under the rug anymore. So it's not, will it come back? And I'm not saying it's going to be a pandemic again, but this type of corruption will come back, because it wasn't this blip on the matrix that you want to believe it was just because you like the guy who was there. It's something that is never going to be dealt with. Republicans, besides maybe Thomas Massey, have no interest in doing this. And until enough people raise awareness and start, taking the power back themselves, farming or being aware of what they buy, because if they can't sell it, if you don't buy it, they won't sell it. It's once people really wake up internally, the solution is peaceful. The solution, you don't have to get angry about it, but pay attention, be informed on this stuff, and then we'll see a change. Where can people find you before we log off?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Josh Rayner Gold.
All right. Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, man.
All right. Thank you guys for joining Dream Rare Podcast. By the way, guys, it's on Facebook, it's on YouTube, it's on BitChute, it's on Rumble, it's on Apple, it's on Spotify, and it's anywhere podcasts are found. Just search Dream Rare Podcast. And if you do that on Spotify or Apple, feel free to give it a 5-star rating. I would appreciate it. Anything lower is blasphemy, but thank you guys for the ratings, and thanks for joining me.